Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where every morning starts with a battle just to survive the day ahead. You trudge out of your cramped, drafty hut, the rough straw mattress sticking to your skin, and you know that the hours ahead will be full of back-breaking labor, often before the sun is fully awake. The smell of smoke from a barely controlled fire mixes with the damp earth underfoot. The cold nips at your fingers, and you remind yourself you probably won't survive this day if you don't keep moving. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, drop a comment with your location and local time so we can feel connected as you drift off to this medieval story. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day begins with the rising sun or the first hint of light creeping through the cracks in the wooden shutters. There's no snooze button here, no luxury of a hot shower or a quick coffee to wake you up. Instead, your morning is a ritual of sheer necessity, gathering firewood to stoke the hearth, fetching water from a distant well, and preparing the meager food you have left. The fire is your lifeline, keeping off the chill that settles in your bones from the night's damp cold. Imagine slipping on rough homemade shoes if you have them at all, and stepping out onto muddy paths that turn slippery with the morning dew. Your hands are already raw from yesterday's work, but the fields await weeds to be pulled and soil to be tilled before planting or harvesting. The village slowly wakes around you, and the air fills with the quiet sounds of others starting their own relentless routines. You might think surviving medieval life is all about dodging battles or dragons, but historians still argue whether the real daily struggle was with the elements and exhaustion rather than warfare. Unlike the romanticized night stories, most people were peasants bound to the land and to endless chores that left little time for rest. While your muscles ache, you carry on hauling buckets of water, chopping wood, tending to livestock that stubbornly refuse to cooperate. Your hands are cracked and calloused, and your back often aches from bending over fields or carrying heavy loads. It's a world where physical strength matters, but even more endurance and the ability to keep going despite discomfort. And here's a quirky fact. Some medieval peasants believed that starting the day by washing their faces with cold water could ward off evil spirits lurking in the morning mist. It wasn't just hygiene, it was a spiritual armor, a small comfort against the uncertainties of life. As the hours tick by, the sun climbs higher, and the relentless routine continues, planting seeds, fixing fences, cooking over smoky fires, and mending clothes by flickering candlelight. You might pause briefly to catch your breath or share a quiet word with a neighbor, but the day is far from over. Each moment is a delicate balance between survival and the slow wearing down of body and spirit. Remember that smell of smoke from the hearth. It's both your friend and your foe. The smoke warms you and keeps the insects away, but over time the indoor air thickens, leading to coughs and sore throats, a common complaint among villagers. Still, it's a small price to pay for warmth and safety. In this world, there are no modern conveniences, no mattress that cradles your body, no soft blankets, no perfectly heated homes. Just hard work and the hope that your efforts today will mean food on the table tomorrow. It's a reminder that comfort is a luxury most medieval people couldn't afford, and every day was a lesson in resilience. And if you think the routine sounds boring, well, you're right. But this boring, repetitive grind is exactly what kept people alive or not. Historians still debate whether the endless labor or the constant threat of hunger was the bigger challenge. One thing's certain, laziness wasn't an option when survival was on the line. So, as you listen and relax, picture yourself trudging through mud, your fingers numb from cold, your breath visible in the crisp morning air. You might catch a glimpse of a neighbor struggling with a stubborn plow, or hear the distant bleating of sheep needing attention. This is the rhythm of medieval life, tough, relentless, and strangely beautiful in its own quiet way. Now imagine after a day like this, you finally collapse onto your hard pallet of straw muscles, aching but grateful for rest. Tomorrow will be just as hard, maybe harder. But for now, you close your eyes, listen to the crackling fire, and hope for another sunrise. You've just survived the relentless demands of a medieval morning, but now comes the question, what's actually on your plate? The truth is, medieval diets were as challenging as the work itself, simple, repetitive, and often insufficient to keep your energy up. You probably won't find a juicy steak or a colorful salad here. Instead, you settle for whatever the season and your social status allow, and often that means hunger is a constant companion. Breakfast might be a thin porridge made from barley oats or rye grains that grow well in your region but lack the calories to fuel a full day of labor. Sometimes you have stale bread dunked in sour ale or watered-down milk if you're lucky. The taste is bland and your stomach grumbles, but you're thankful for the warmth and the little fuel it provides. Lunch, if you get one, is a small meal, perhaps leftover pottage, a thick stew of beans, peas, root vegetables, and occasionally scraps of meat or fish. For the vast majority, meat is a rare treat, often reserved for feast days or the Lord's table. Fresh vegetables, as we know them today, are limited to what you can grow or forage, and spices are expensive luxuries brought by faraway traders. Speaking of spices, here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval cooks sometimes used crushed roses or lavender to add flavor to their stews, not because it tasted like modern seasoning, but because the floral scents masked the less fresh ingredients. Imagine trying to convince your palate that rosewater chicken was haute cuisine. Water is another tricky issue. You drink from wells, rivers, or streams that are often polluted, leading to frequent bouts of stomach ailments. Beer or weak ale is a common substitute because the brewing process kills harmful bacteria, a medieval version of better safe than sorry. Remember, historians still argue whether ale was consumed mainly for nutrition or simply because clean water was scarce. Hunger was more than a passing nuisance, it shaped the entire rhythm of life. Years of poor harvests could lead to famine, forcing people to eat roots bark or even resort to more desperate measures. Some accounts speak of peasants boiling leather or worse to stave off starvation. But it wasn't just about food scarcity. The nutrient-poor diet meant people were often weak and susceptible to disease. Surprisingly, some medieval communities practiced a form of food sharing and communal cooking to stretch limited resources. You might gather with neighbors for a shared meal of gruel or bread, a rare moment of warmth and camaraderie in an otherwise grim day. And here's a lesser-known fact. Certain monasteries maintained elaborate herb gardens, growing plants not just for medicine, but also to flavor their meager meals. These gardens were oases of green and hope amid the otherwise dull landscape of medieval food. Your daily meals also depended heavily on the season. Winter brought long nights and meager stores, while summer offered fresh produce, wild berries, and fish from nearby rivers. But the unpredictability of weather could wipe out crops and force communities into survival mode. Historians still debate how much medieval people relied on preserved foods like salted fish and dried grains versus fresh produce. Salt was another precious commodity, not just for flavor, but crucial for preserving meat and fish. Without it, you faced the grim prospect of food spoilage and waste. The salt trade routes were vital arteries of the medieval economy, often protected fiercely by lords and merchants. And while you might think that medieval people were more patient with hunger, starvation was a terrifying reality that shaped family decisions, birth rates, and even the outcome of wars. Food scarcity could spark unrest, drive migration, and alter social structures. It was a shadow looming over every aspect of daily life. So as you settle into the idea of medieval meals, imagine the earthy taste of rough bread, the thin warmth of porridge, and the fleeting sweetness of wild berries plucked from hedgerows. You might feel the growl of your stomach and the lingering chill of the hearth's smoke, but also a fierce determination to keep going, fueled by whatever scraps the day provides. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And that's what survival looked like on a plate back then, simple, often harsh, but wrapped in the comforting rhythm of community and the ever-present hope for the next harvest. You've just imagined the humble, sometimes meager meals. But now the reality of medieval hygiene slowly creeps in like an uninvited shadow at the edge of your day. Clean water is a luxury, bathing is rare, and even the simplest of sanitation measures are barely understood or practiced. You trudge through mud and filth, unaware that the very world around you is teeming with invisible threats. It's no wonder diseases spread like wildfire, turning minor ailments into deadly dangers. Picture the village streets' narrow, unpaved lanes where animal waste mingles with human refuse. Garbage piles up in corners, and the smell is a constant companion, so much so that you hardly notice it anymore. There's no formal waste disposal system. Everything is left to decay in the open air. Remember that smoky hearth. The smoke helps keep bugs away, but it does nothing to clear the festering dirt just outside your door. Bathing, when it happens, is often a quick plunge into a cold river or shared bathhouse where water is rarely fresh. The idea of daily showers or even weekly baths is foreign. Cleanliness was understood more in terms of ritual purity than hygiene. Some folks believed that too much washing could actually harm health by letting in evil spirits. Quirky as it sounds, this belief was widespread and shaped daily habits. You might think medieval people were lazy about cleanliness, but historians still argue whether the lack of hygiene was more due to ignorance, superstition, or simply the impracticality of their environment. Without modern plumbing or soap as we know it, staying clean was an uphill battle. Washing clothes was another chore fraught with challenges. Water heated over a fire scrub brushes and lye made from wood ash were the primary tools. The smell of damp, unwashed fabric often lingered on garments, and fresh clothes were a rarity for most. Your clothes may feel like a second layer of grime, but it's all you have to protect against cold and dirt. And here's a fringe tidbit. Some medieval folks used crushed herbs like rosemary or lavender as a natural deodorant tucked into their clothing or worn as sachets to mask odors. It's like a medieval version of eau de no shower. You'd probably want a few sprigs of that yourself right now. Disease is the grim consequence of these conditions. Plagues, fevers, and infections thrived in this environment. Remember that your body is already weakened by poor diet and constant labor, so a simple cut or cold could quickly become fatal. The infamous Black Death, which would sweep through Europe in the 14th century, found its perfect breeding ground in crowded, unsanitary towns. But disease wasn't just about bacteria and viruses. It was also linked to spiritual beliefs. People thought illnesses could be punishment from God or caused by evil spirits. This blend of medicine and superstition influenced treatment and prevention, often making matters worse. Historians still debate how much medieval medical knowledge actually helped versus hindered patients. Interestingly, in some cities, early attempts at public health emerged. Regulations were passed to clean streets or control waste, but enforcement was patchy at best. Wealthier households might have private latrines or access to cleaner water sources, but for most, sanitation was a daily hazard. Imagine yourself living here, your hands grimy, your skin covered in sweat and soot, with only a brief chance to rinse in cold water before another day of toil. You share your space with animals, rodents, and insects, all of whom carry germs you can't see but feel the effects of. Your clothes, your bedding, even the air is heavy with unseen dangers. And yet, despite these grim realities, people adapted. Folk remedies, herbal baths, and prayers formed a patchwork defense. While today's hospitals seem a world away, Medieval people had their own health practices rooted in observation and tradition, however imperfect. So, as you imagine the smells, the textures, and the risks, remember that medieval hygiene was less about squeaky clean and more about survival in a hostile environment. It's a world where dirt and disease walk hand in hand, and every small act of cleanliness is a quiet rebellion against the odds. You've managed your meager meals and navigated the grime of daily life, but now it's time to think about the very walls that shelter you, or at least try to. Medieval homes were far from the cozy, insulated spaces we take for granted today. Instead, they were often cold, damp, and cramped, providing just enough protection from the elements to keep you alive, if not entirely comfortable. Imagine stepping inside a small wooden or stone hut where the floor is packed earth and the roof is thatched with straw or reeds. There's a central hearth, the heart of the home, where a small fire smokes more than it warms. The smoke lingers, seeping through cracks in the walls and the roof escaping through a simple hole above. Without chimneys, much of the smoke stays inside, making the air thick and eyes water. Your sleeping space might be a raised wooden platform covered with straw or rushes, possibly a shared bed if you're lucky enough to have one. Blankets are thin and often homemade from wool or linen, providing little insulation against the cold night air. You wrap yourself tightly, but drafts creep through gaps in the walls and the chill seeps into your bones. In wealthier households, you might find tapestries hung on walls to keep out the cold, but for most peasants, walls were bare and thin, offering minimal defense against wind and rain. Rainwater could seep through thatched roofs, pooling on the floor or soaking your bedding. Mold and dampness were constant annoyances, often making respiratory illnesses worse. Now here's a quirky bit. Some medieval people believed that cats were magical creatures that protected their homes from evil spirits, which might explain why so many households had a cat or two curled up by the fire. Of course, they were also handy for keeping rodents at bay, a practical benefit in a home filled with food stores and fragile cloth. You might wonder how families managed with so little space. Houses were often multi-purpose. The same room served as kitchen, living area, and bedroom. Privacy was scarce, and multiple generations might live under one roof. Noise and activity persisted well into the night, making quiet rest a rare luxury. Historians still argue whether medieval homes were more about shelter from the worst weather or about social status display. A peasant's hut might be barely functional, but even castles had chilly, drafty rooms without modern heating. The difference was in size, and some added comforts like tapestries and thicker walls. In towns and cities, space was even tighter. Houses were packed closely together, sometimes with overhanging upper stories that blocked sunlight from the streets below. Narrow alleys and shared walls created a maze-like environment that made airflow poor and sanitation difficult. The crowded conditions contributed to the spread of disease and discomfort. Outside outhouses or chamber pots served as toilets, often emptied directly into the street or nearby water sources. This setup, as you can imagine, did little to improve the living environment. The smells and sights of refuse were ever-present companions. And yet amidst these challenges, homes were places of warmth and safety, however modest. Family life continued. Meals were shared, stories told, and rituals observed. The home was your refuge from the outside world, even if that refuge was far from perfect. So picture yourself settling down in such a space as the day winds down. The fire crackles, shadows dance on rough walls, and the damp chill presses close. You pull your thin blanket tighter, try to ignore the creaks and noises outside, and hope for a restful night. It's not the cozy bedroom you're used to, but it's home. The next morning, you'll emerge from this humble shelter back into the cold and mud, ready to start the relentless routine again. But for now, the shelter stands as a fragile shield, a quiet reminder of how precious and precarious medieval life truly was. You've settled in your humble shelter, and now the topic shifts to medical care, an area where medieval life's challenges multiply in strange and sometimes surprising ways. Without the benefits of modern hospitals or scientific medicine, people relied heavily on folk remedies, herbal concoctions, and a pinch of hope. Imagine visiting the village healer whose toolkit is more curiosity than cure and whose treatments might seem odd to your modern sensibilities. The healer's knowledge blends herbs like chamomile willow bark and nettle with rituals and prayers. Sometimes they mix potions, apply poultices, or perform simple surgeries like bloodletting, all while reciting chants to ward off evil spirits believed to cause disease. It's a world where medicine and magic overlap and where desperation often trumps evidence. A mainstream fact, bloodletting was a common practice believed to balance the body's humors. You might find yourself sitting patiently as a barber surgeon opens a vein, hoping the draining of blood will ease your fever or headache. Of course, historians still argue whether this actually helped or hastened many deaths. On the fringe side, some treatments sound downright peculiar, like applying crushed spider webs to wounds or using animal dung as a salve. Egyptian crocodile dung sunscreen might have been a distant cousin to these odd mixtures, but medieval Europe had its own bizarre remedies. You might cringe, but these were acts of hope born from a desperate attempt to fight pain and illness. Medicine was a mix of trial tradition and superstition. Herbs were gathered from fields, forests, and gardens, with some monks meticulously copying medical texts and experimenting with plant properties. Monasteries often became centers of healing, preserving knowledge through turbulent times. If you broke a bone, you faced a long and painful recovery without anesthesia or sterilization. Infection was a constant risk, and many injuries that seem minor today could be fatal. Yet you tried to keep spirits up, hoping your body would mend with time and care. Mental health, though rarely acknowledged, also played a role. Conditions like anxiety and depression were often interpreted as spiritual afflictions, and treatments might involve prayer isolation or exorcism. Historians still debate how medieval people understood and coped with psychological suffering. One curious practice involved theriac, a concoction of numerous herbs and even snake flesh touted as a universal antidote to poisons and illnesses. It was believed to cure everything from plague to snakebite, though its effectiveness was questionable at best. Your experience with medieval medicine might feel like walking a tightrope, trusting remedies that sometimes helped but often caused new problems. Despite all this, many communities had folk healers whose knowledge saved countless lives passed down through generations. Imagine the relief of a cooled compress on a feverish forehead, the scent of lavender easing a restless night, or a warm herbal tea soothing aching muscles after a day of toil. These small comforts mattered deeply, even if the bigger picture was grim. So, as you picture the healer's humble hut filled with jars of dried herbs and strange powders, remember that medieval medicine was a blend of hope, faith, and observation, imperfect but vital. It's a reminder that survival was as much about belief and community as it was about the body itself. You've faced the challenges of medicine, and now we turn to a particularly fragile part of medieval life: childhood. It's a chapter that weighs heavy on any understanding of the era, as high mortality rates among the young made growing up a precarious journey. You probably won't survive to adulthood, whispers the grim reality, but every child was a miracle worth fighting for. Picture a small village where children run barefoot through fields and alleys, their faces smudged with dirt and bright with curiosity. Yet beneath this innocence lurks a shadow. Diseases like measles, smallpox, and whooping cough are constant threats, often claiming the very youngest before they take their first steps into adulthood. Parents do what they can, bathing their babies in herbal waters, wrapping them in soft linens, and offering prayers to saints and spirits for protection. But the limitations of medieval medicine and hygiene mean many children fall ill and never recover. Historically, estimates suggest that nearly 1/3 to 1/2 of children did not survive past age 5. It's a harsh statistic, but one that shaped family life profoundly. High birth rates were common, partly to offset these losses. You might imagine a house filled with many siblings, each carrying the hope of family legacy. There's a quirky but tender detail: some medieval parents carried protective charms or amulets to guard their children against the evil eye, a superstition that a jealous glance could cause illness or misfortune. These charms were often simple trinkets, crosses, stones, or embroidered cloth imbued with as much hope as actual power. Schooling was a luxury mostly reserved for boys in wealthier families, and even then, education could be interrupted by illness or the need for children to help with chores. Girls were generally taught skills at home, preparing for roles as wives and mothers, adding another layer to their survival challenges. Historians still argue about the extent to which childhood was a protected or celebrated phase of life versus a preparation for the harsh realities ahead. Childhood games and play existed, but the line between innocence and responsibility was thin. Nutrition, or lack thereof, further complicated survival. Children's diets were similar to adults, but often less substantial, making them more vulnerable to deficiencies and weakness. A sick child might be cared for with herbal teas and gentle feeding, but the outcomes were uncertain. Imagine the constant worry etched on parents' faces, the sleepless nights by a sick child's side, and the quiet grief of those who lost little ones too soon. Yet, despite this, children's laughter echoed through villages, a fragile but persistent melody of life. Communities sometimes gathered to support grieving families with rituals that blended faith and folk tradition. Baptisms, naming ceremonies, and communal prayers marked the few moments when childhood's preciousness was openly celebrated. So, as you picture a child clutching a worn doll or chasing chickens through a dusty yard, remember the fragile balance of joy and peril that defined medieval childhood. It's a reminder that every small life was a beacon of hope amid hardship, shining briefly but brightly. You felt the fragility of childhood, and now it's time to look at the relentless demands of work, because rest was often a stranger in medieval life. Imagine waking before dawn, your body already sore from the day before, knowing you must labor through long hours under the sun or in cold fields. The rhythm of work dictated the pace of life, and exhaustion was a constant, heavy companion. Your tasks vary with the seasons, but often include tilling soil with primitive tools, planting seeds, weeding, harvesting crops, or tending livestock. Each action requires strength and endurance, with little time or energy left for leisure. Even after a full day, there's mending fences, repairing tools, or preparing food to complete. Physical exhaustion isn't just from the work, but also from the weight of responsibilities. If you're a peasant, the land you cultivate might belong to a lord who claims a portion of your harvest. This means your labor feeds not just your family, but also those with power, often leaving you barely enough. You might think medieval people had breaks or weekends, but the concept of leisure as we know it didn't exist for most. Holidays were rare and often tied to religious observances, which themselves could involve fasting or more work. Historians still argue about how much time ordinary people had to rest and whether any downtime was truly restful. A quirky detail: some workers believed that whistling while working could keep spirits high and ward off bad luck, adding a little melody to the toil. This simple habit shows how even in hardship, people found ways to lighten their load. Women's work added another layer to exhaustion, managing household tasks like cooking, cleaning, spinning wool, and caring for children. Their day started early and ended late, often without pause. Both men and women shared the burden of survival, though in different ways. Long hours bent over rough tools led to chronic aches and injuries. Without modern ergonomics, repetitive motions and heavy lifting took a toll on bodies, sometimes cutting working lives short. You might limp through days with swollen joints or aching backs, but stopping meant risking your family's survival. You also contend with weather's whims, scorching heat, or biting cold made labor even harder. Protective gear was minimal, often just thick wool or linen, not much help against the elements. Your hands might blister or freeze, and your feet ache from rough shoes or none at all. Remember that cold, damp home from earlier. After a day of work, returning to such shelter meant muscles stiffening quickly without proper warmth or care. Nighttime rest was important, but rarely fully restorative. While you might imagine rest as lying in a comfortable bed, medieval rest often meant sitting by the hearth, doing light chores, or talking quietly. Sleep could be interrupted by noises, animals, neighbors, or weather, making full recovery difficult. Yet, despite this relentless schedule, work provided structure and purpose. The land demanded care, and the seasons commanded attention. You found meaning in your efforts, even if exhaustion was never far away. So picture yourself moving steadily through fields, or weaving wool by candlelight, muscles aching but determination strong. Work was survival, and survival was work. It's a demanding cycle with little mercy, but it shaped the resilience of a generation. You're worn from endless labor, but life's challenges extend beyond muscles and fields' social hierarchy. Rules your world, shaping not just your work, but your very identity and opportunities. Picture a rigid ladder stretching from the lowliest peasant to the distant, untouchable nobility, with almost no rungs you can climb. This structure confines your daily life, often determining what you eat, where you sleep, and even how you rest. Your place is fixed by birth. If you are born a serf or commoner, chances are you will remain one bound to the land and your lord's whims. Lords own the fields, the forests, and the rights to justice within their domains, while you provide the labor and obey their commands. Freedom is rare, and social mobility is more a dream than a reality. Imagine a village meeting where the Lord passes decrees that affect your daily life. How much tax you pay when you can hunt or gather wood, and even which markets you can attend. Your voice is small, and resistance often carries heavy consequences, though punishments were sometimes peculiarly mild by today's standards. Here's a curious detail: certain towns developed guilds, associations of craftsmen and merchants that offered some social support and protection. Joining a guild could mean better work conditions, training, and a small step up in status. But these were limited to specific trades and locations, and many peasants remained outside this world. Women's roles were also shaped by this hierarchy. Noble women managed estates and wielded influence, but peasant women juggled exhausting work with little recognition. Their social position dictated their daily tasks and the respect they received. Historians still argue how flexible medieval social structures really were. Some evidence suggests small opportunities for advancement existed, like marrying into a higher class or buying freedom, but these were exceptional cases, not the rule. Your dress reflects your rank. Too simple homespun fabrics for peasants, finer wools and silks reserved for the upper classes. Even food varies. Peasants subsist on bread and pottage, while nobles enjoy roasted meats and exotic spices. This hierarchy also influences your rest. Nobles may sleep on feather beds with thick blankets, while you make do with straw and thin cloth. Their days include hunting and leisure, yours include toil and survival. Travel was another divider. Lords and merchants moved widely, spreading news and culture, but peasants rarely ventured far from their village, tied to the land and the seasons. Isolation added to hardship and limited exposure to new ideas or opportunities. Community events and festivals sometimes blurred these lines, offering moments where social ranks mingled, if only briefly. Yet the divide remained, reinforced by laws, customs, and daily practice. So, as you picture yourself in this social web, know that your place is largely predetermined, with limited chances to escape the cycle. Your efforts sustain the higher ranks, yet your own life is shaped by the invisible but powerful chains of hierarchy. It's a sobering thought. Your status touches every part of your existence, from the food you eat to the hours you rest. Yet within these bounds, people carved out lives full of meaning, family, and resilience. You've navigated the social ladder, but now you face nature's whims, seasonal cycles, and agricultural risks that dictated life's fragile rhythm. Imagine the arrival of spring, when fields turn from brown to green, promising food and survival. But just as hope blooms, the threat of bad weather or pestilence lurks, turning abundance into scarcity. Farming was the backbone of medieval life, yet it was a gamble. A harsh winter, early frost, or prolonged drought could ruin crops. You spend months planting and tending, knowing that a single bad season might mean hunger or worse for your family. The calendar of sowing, growing, and harvesting dictated your every move. One mainstream fact: medieval people used the Julian calendar to mark planting times and religious festivals, blending agricultural needs with faith. Holidays often coincided with seasonal changes, a gentle reminder of the land's power over life. There's a quirky tidbit: some believed that planting crops on certain moon phases would ensure better growth. Farmers consulted lunar calendars, trusting that the moon's light influenced seeds' success, a blend of science, superstition, and hope. Food preservation was another challenge. Without refrigeration, you relied on salting, smoking, drying, or fermenting to store meat and vegetables. These methods extended food life but altered flavors, creating staples like salted pork or pickled cabbage. Historians still argue about the extent to which medieval communities successfully buffered against famine through storage and trade. Local harvests were vulnerable, but trade routes, though risky, brought some relief in hard times. Livestock added another layer of risk. Disease, predators, or theft could decimate your small herd, threatening both food and income. You guarded animals vigilantly, knowing that their loss could spell disaster. Weather's unpredictability shaped your mindset. Storms might flood fields or damage homes, forcing quick repairs with whatever materials you had. The constant threat made planning difficult and added stress to daily life. And then there's the simple joy, if rare, of harvest festivals, when communities celebrated the fruits of their labor with music, dancing, and feasting. These moments of lightness balanced the weight of anxiety, binding people together. As you imagine the changing seasons, feel the biting cold of winter winds or the warm sun on freshly plowed earth. The land was both provider and adversary, a living force that commanded respect and constant vigilance. Your survival depended on reading these cycles, adapting quickly, and holding on to hope that next year might be better. It was a dance with nature's moods, sometimes graceful, often harsh. So, as you listen, picture yourself in muddy fields, hands covered in soil, eyes scanning the sky for signs of rain or drought. The fate of your family rides on these signs, and the calendar is both guide and reminder of life's fragility. It's a timeless struggle, one that shaped medieval life deeply and continues to echo in the rhythms of human existence. You've felt the power of nature, but now let's turn to the rules that bound you. The laws, punishments, and social controls that maintained order in a world where survival itself was so precarious. Imagine a village meeting where disputes are settled not by lengthy trials, but by simple decrees often enforced by the local lord or his appointed officers. These rules governed everything from property rights to daily behavior, ensuring that chaos didn't unravel the fragile fabric of community life. Punishments might seem peculiar to you now: fines for minor offenses, public shaming for social missteps, or brief stints in the stocks rather than harsh physical penalties. The focus was often on restoring order and deterring repeat offenses rather than inflicting cruelty. Still, you tread carefully. Breaking the Lord's rules could disrupt your already fragile existence. Here's an interesting fact. Some villages practiced day fines, where the penalty was based on the offender's income, an early form of proportional justice. It might seem fairer than a fixed punishment, but for the poor, even small fines could be devastating. A quirky detail: certain towns banned noisy night gatherings to prevent disturbances, and violators could be forced to wear a brank or scold's bridle, a metal mask designed to silence talkative offenders. Imagine trying to sleep peacefully while worrying about gossip leading to such a fate. Historians still argue how effective medieval laws were at controlling crime, given the limited enforcement resources and the reliance on local customs. Many communities depended on informal social pressure as much as formal punishment. Social control extended beyond legal rules. Customs and expectations about behavior, dress, and speech shaped daily life. Deviating from norms could lead to ostracism or suspicion, powerful deterrents in tight-knit villages. Gender played a role here too. Women accused of gossiping or other disorders could face public shaming or restrictions. Men had their own codes of conduct, often enforced by honor and reputation. Remember that rigid social hierarchy we talked about. It underpinned the legal system, with nobles often judged more leniently and peasants facing harsher scrutiny. Justice was rarely blind, reflecting the inequalities of the time. Travelers and outsiders were sometimes mistrusted, with laws restricting movement or requiring special permissions to enter towns or markets. This limited the spread of ideas but reinforced control. Punishments for serious crimes like theft or violence were more severe, but even these often avoided the brutality we imagine from medieval tales. Execution was relatively rare, reserved for major offenses or threats to authority. Your own daily behavior is shaped by this system. You know the boundaries, the consequences of crossing them, and the subtle ways community members watch one another. Order is survival after all. So, picture yourself moving carefully through this network of rules and expectations, aware that your reputation matters as much as your strength or skill. It's a delicate balance between freedom and control, shaped by centuries of custom. In this world, laws are not just written words, but living forces influencing every step, every word, every moment of your life. You've navigated laws and punishments, but now the focus shifts to the invisible lines that divided daily life, gender roles, and expectations. Imagine waking up knowing that your day's tasks, your freedoms, and even your worth hinge on whether you are male or female, a strict code woven into the very fabric of medieval society. For men, strength and public presence defined status. You are expected to labor in the fields, defend your village, or apprentice in a trade. Your day is filled with visible work that shapes the community's survival. Leadership and property rights mostly belong to you, and your worth often ties to your ability to provide and protect. Women's lives, by contrast, revolve around the household and family care. You wake early to prepare food, clean, spin wool, and tend children, often juggling countless chores with little time for rest. Your social mobility is limited, and marriage is a central milestone shaping your role and security. But these roles are not rigid prisons. Some women manage farms, inherit property, or even participate in local markets. Widows might gain surprising independence, and noblewomen sometimes wield political influence behind the scenes. Historians still argue how much agency women truly held versus how tightly society constrained them. A quirky example: in some areas, women held annual feasts of fools, where traditional roles reversed, briefly offering a playful, if temporary, escape from norms. It's a reminder that even in rigid societies, humor and rebellion find a way. Children learn these roles early. Boys play rough games, imitating warriors or farmers. Girls help with household tasks, preparing for adult responsibilities. Education is gendered too, with boys more likely to attend schools or apprenticeships, while girls learn domestic skills. Expectations extend to behavior and dress. Men wear sturdy, practical clothing suited for work, while women's attire signals marital status and social rank. Public decorum, modesty, and obedience are emphasized for women, while men are encouraged to be assertive and strong. Religious teachings reinforce these roles, promoting ideals of masculinity and femininity that shape daily interactions and life choices. The Church's influence touches everything from marriage laws to social conduct. You might think these divisions limit personal freedom, but within them, people found meaning, identity, and community belonging. Family ties, friendships, and social networks provide support amid expectations. Physical labor for women was often as demanding as men's, though different in nature. Tasks like fetching water, grinding grain, and childcare require stamina and skill, contributing crucially to household survival. So imagine yourself stepping into these roles, feeling the weight of expectations, but also the pride of contributing to family and community. It's a world where gender defines your daily experience, deeply shaping joys and struggles alike. This invisible structure shapes not just work, but rest, relationships, and survival itself, reminding us how identity and duty intertwine in human life. You've lived within your gender's roles, but the world outside your village or town is far less predictable. Travel and movement were fraught with dangers and isolation. Imagine setting out on the road. No paved highways, no inns at every mile, just muddy paths winding through forests, fields, and uncertain territory. Journeys were not simple errands, but expeditions that tested your courage and resilience. Travel was slow and risky. Roads could be little more than rutted tracks swollen with rain or choked with dust. You might walk alongside carts loaded with goods or ride horseback if you're lucky, but bandits, wild animals, and harsh weather were constant threats. Travelers often moved in groups for safety, sharing tales around campfires under open skies. Long distances separated communities and news traveled slowly. The isolation of rural life meant that you might go weeks without seeing a stranger or hearing new ideas. Letters and messages were rare and delivered by messengers on horseback who themselves braved the dangers of the road. A quirky detail, some travelers carried protective charms or symbols like crosses or pilgrim badges, hoping to ward off evil and attract safe passage. You'd probably clutch such a talisman tightly during dark forest crossings. Historians still debate the extent to which medieval people were mobile. While most peasants stayed close to home, trade, pilgrimage, and war brought some people great distances. Yet for many, the world beyond their village was a place of mystery and danger. Isolation wasn't just physical, it extended to culture and knowledge. Without books or schools nearby, information was shared orally in stories and songs, which both preserved tradition and limited new ideas. You might imagine the loneliness of a farmer whose family worked together daily, but whose nearest neighbor lives miles away. Festivals and markets were rare opportunities for social connection, eagerly anticipated yet infrequent. Travel was also a social divider. Nobles and merchants could journey to castles, courts, and distant lands, spreading news and goods. Peasants and laborers had fewer opportunities, their movement restricted by economic and social bonds. Weather again played a cruel role. Rain could wash out roads, snow could trap travelers in place. Without proper shelter, overnight stays were uncomfortable and unsafe, often spent in barns, churches, or under the stars. So, as you picture yourself walking a lonely path, the sounds of the forest all around the chill settling in, remember that medieval travel was an adventure reserved mostly for the brave or desperate. It's a reminder of how place and movement shape experience and survival. This loneliness, this uncertainty, colors much of medieval life, adding an invisible weight to each day's labor and each night's rest. You've endured the loneliness of travel and the demands of daily survival, but life's harshness was softened by the rituals and gatherings that knit communities together. Imagine the village square on a festival day. The scent of roasting meat mingles with the sweet smoke of candles, laughter bubbles through the air, and music invites even the weariest to dance. These moments weren't just breaks from toil, they were lifelines, rituals that helped people cope with hardship. Community festivals often tied to religious holidays, agricultural milestones, or local traditions. They marked the changing seasons, celebrated successful harvests, or sought divine favor for the coming year. You might find yourself participating in processions, feasting on shared meals, or joining in games and competitions. One mainstream fact: many festivals combined Christian and older pagan customs, blending rituals that connected people both to faith and to the land. This fusion created a rich tapestry of culture and meaning. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some areas, mumming involved masked performances, where villagers enacted humorous or supernatural stories, giving voice to fears and hopes in playful disguise. Think of it as medieval community theatre with a touch of mischief. Faith played a central role in coping. Prayer pilgrimages and church attendance offered solace and a sense of order amid uncertainty. Saints' relics were believed to protect communities, and holy water was sprinkled for blessing and protection. Historians still argue how much these rituals provided psychological relief versus reinforcing social hierarchies. Some say festivals allowed temporary escapes from daily stress. Others see them as means to control and unify populations. Humor and storytelling were vital too. Tales of tricksters, clever peasants, and even saints' miracles brought laughter and lessons. Oral traditions passed wisdom and community values down generations, making stories as precious as bread. Shared labor itself was ritualistic. Communal workdays like barn raising or harvest help created bonds and distributed burdens. These gatherings blended productivity with social connection, easing the harshness of work. Even in grief, rituals helped. Funerals, wakes, and memorials allowed communities to mourn together, sharing loss and support. These acts of remembrance knit families and neighbors into enduring networks. So imagine yourself amidst this vibrant life: music, dance, firelight flickering on faces, voices raised in song or prayer. The burdens of survival don't disappear, but they soften, wrapped in warmth and belonging. It's in these rituals, these gatherings, that medieval people found resilience and hope, proof that even in hard times, human connection endures. You've felt the comfort of community rituals, but beneath the surface, the mental and emotional toll of medieval life was profound. Imagine waking each day with the weight of uncertainty pressing down, fear of illness, hunger, loss, or violence. Stress and anxiety, though unspoken in medieval terms, shaped thoughts and behaviors in ways we're only beginning to understand. Without modern psychology, people interpreted mental distress through spiritual or moral lenses. Melancholy was seen as an imbalance of the humors or a sign of divine punishment. Those suffering might be prescribed prayer pilgrimage or sometimes isolation. Yet within families and communities, quiet care and support existed, even if fragile. You probably won't find medieval equivalents of therapists, but scribes and monks wrote extensively about the soul's struggles, blending medical and religious ideas. The body and mind were intertwined, and treatments aimed to heal both, even if success was limited. A fringe tidbit: some medieval remedies for melancholy included music therapy, dancing, or engaging in stimulating conversation, recognizing that emotional engagement could ease suffering. It's a surprising glimpse of early holistic care. Historians still debate how widespread understanding of mental health was and whether common folk experienced similar concepts. It's clear, though, that stress from famine, war, and poverty left scars beyond the physical. Fear of death was ever present. Plague outbreaks, unpredictable weather, and violent conflicts loomed constantly. People sought solace in faith rituals and community bonds, which provided structure and hope in a chaotic world. Imagination played a role too. Stories of demons, angels, and miracles shaped how people understood suffering and endurance. These narratives helped explain the unexplainable and offered meaning amid hardship. You might picture a weary farmer pausing to gaze at the sky, wrestling with doubts and hopes alike, or a mother praying for her child's recovery through long nights. These moments of quiet reflection and despair were part of the human experience then as now. Resilience emerged in small acts, shared meals, a helping hand, a comforting word. Though life was harsh, the human spirit found ways to endure, to hope, and sometimes to find joy. So, as you drift toward rest, remember that medieval minds grappled with fears and hopes, much like yours. Their struggles are part of our shared humanity, echoing across centuries in whispers and prayers. You've traveled through the harsh realities of medieval life, and now it's time to reflect on the legacy it left and the debates that still swirl among historians. Picture a vast tapestry woven from countless stories of struggle, resilience, and change, a tapestry whose threads continue to shape how we understand the Middle Ages today. Medieval hardships influenced social structures, economies, and cultural practices for centuries. The survival challenges, disease, labor, scarcity, spurred innovations in agriculture, medicine, and governance. Castles and towns grew, markets flourished, and new ideas slowly emerged from the shadows of difficulty. Yet historians still argue about the true nature of medieval life. Was it a grim age of endless toil and suffering, or a complex era with moments of joy, creativity, and community strength? Some emphasize the horrors, while others highlight the resilience and adaptability of ordinary people. One curious fact: archaeological discoveries continue to challenge old assumptions. For example, analysis of bones reveals varied diets and health conditions, showing that not all medieval peasants lived in dire poverty. Some communities managed surprising levels of well-being despite hardships. The role of women, children, and marginalized groups is also re-evaluated, uncovering stories of agency and influence often overlooked. These fresh perspectives paint a richer, more nuanced picture of medieval society. Medieval life's legacy extends beyond history books. It informs our understanding of human endurance and adaptation. The rhythms of work and rest, the blending of faith and daily life, the creation of community rituals all resonate with our modern experiences. So, as you listen, let this journey remind you that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about real people navigating challenges with courage and hope. Their stories whisper to us, bridging centuries with lessons of survival and humanity. Now, as the final embers of this tale glow, softly feel the slow settling of the day's weight. Let the images fade gently, the rough homes, the busy fields, the festive gatherings all merging into a quiet night. Breathe in calm and breathe out tension. The past is with you, a quiet companion in this moment of rest. Close your eyes. Let the soft hum of your room cradle you, and know that you carry forward a legacy of resilience. Sleep well, wrapped in the gentle embrace of stories told and lives remembered. The day's harshness softens now, like twilight melting into night. Imagine the fields falling silent, the hearth's last flickers of warmth fading gently, and the cool night air wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Your breath slows your muscles, relax, and the worries of survival grow distant, replaced by the quiet rhythm of rest. Though medieval life was filled with challenges beyond most modern imaginings, there is comfort in knowing that people then found ways to connect to hope and to carry on. Their days were tough, but within their routines were moments of joy, laughter, and meaning, threads of light woven through a difficult tapestry. As you drift deeper into sleep, let the stories of resilience and adaptation soothe your mind. The smell of fresh bread baking, the crackle of firewood, the distant murmur of festival songs all become gentle whispers in your dreams. Rest is a gift, a pause in life's relentless march, and as you close your eyes, may you find peace in the shared humanity that links past and present. The struggles of those long ago remind us how strong and enduring the human spirit can be. Sleep well, now carried on the soft wings of history, embraced by the quiet courage of those who came before. Tomorrow holds new light, but for tonight, let the past be your lullaby. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams.